The ship hummed softly, the quiet vibrations a constant companion to Alia's solitude. She sat in the cockpit, eyes fixed on the flickering console in front of her, where static occasionally broke the silence, as though something, anything, could break through the emptiness of deep space. Her fingers hovered over controls, but she knew that the ship's systems were far beyond saving. The lights were dimming again, and the oxygen supply was running low. Her stomach growled weakly, reminding her that food rations had all but run out. For the 100th time that day, she ran the numbers through her mind. She'd been stranded for almost 6 months. The mission had been a simple one: explore the newly discovered asteroid belt, map it, and return. The course had been calculated with precision, but the unexpected collision with an unknown object had sent her ship tumbling off course, stranded in a dark pocket of the galaxy. No one had been able to reach her. No rescue mission. No contact. Her comms had been silent for weeks now, and her isolation was complete. Her survival skills were all that kept her alive now, but even that would only stretch so far. She had stopped counting the days. It was pointless. Time lost its meaning when you were alone, when you were waiting for something, anything, to happen. The stars outside her viewport seemed so far away, and the dark vastness of space felt like it was closing in on her, suffocating her with its silence. The thought of never seeing Earth again made her chest tighten, but there was nothing to be done about it. Her mind wandered again to the last messages she'd sent before the systems went fully dark. Desperate pleas for help, an SOS that had been broadcasted far into the unknown. She remembered how her heart had raced when the first faint signal had come in, so distant, barely audible, like the echo of someone else stranded out there, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. She'd tried everything she could think of to regain contact, but the static had swallowed her attempts whole. The desperation was beginning to settle in her bones, wearing her down. The thought of being forgotten, of never being found, was too much to bear, but the alternative, the terrifying thought that she might die here, alone, in this cold metal tomb, was worse. What had begun as a dream of exploration had turned into a nightmare of survival, each passing day dragging her further from the woman she used to be. Just then, the console crackled. The lights in the cockpit flickered, then steadied. For a moment, she couldn't believe it. Was it just a malfunction? Or something else? She leaned forward, her breath shallow as her fingers darted over the buttons. The frequency was weak, but unmistakable. A transmission. Someone was out there. She quickly adjusted the frequency, trying to bring in the signal, any hint of clarity. The static buzzed again, but there was a pattern now. A rhythm, like a heartbeat, a pulse she could follow. Her heart skipped. Could it be a ship? Could someone else be out here, this far from the known universe? "Hello?" she whispered, though she knew no one could hear her. It was a reflex, a futile gesture, but it made her feel less insane, somehow. The signal shifted again, sharp and clear now, though still faint. She heard a voice, garbled, but the words, human words, cut through the static. "This is Captain Gray of the Aquila." "Who is this?" "Over." Alia froze, her mind racing to make sense of what she was hearing. A human ship? Out here? So far from civilization? The chances of encountering another ship were almost impossible. And yet, here it was. "Alia," she managed to say, her voice rough from days of disuse. "Alia Marlow, I'm stranded. I need help. Can you hear me?" For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the voice came again, this time clearer, more focused. "We hear you, Alia. We've been picking up your distress signal. Hold tight, we're coming to get you. Stay with us, okay? Just stay with us." Her hands trembled as she clutched the controls, feeling a rush of emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. Hope, fear, relief, and a deep, bone-shaking exhaustion. The Aquila was coming. Someone was coming for her. After all this time, she wasn't alone anymore. The message continued, giving her coordinates, a plan of approach, but Alia wasn't listening. The overwhelming sense of reality crashing back and was too much. Her eyes stung, her heart thudded against her ribs, and she couldn't suppress the tears that finally spilled over. She had tried so hard to hold it together, but now, the weight of everything, of the endless isolation, the hunger, the fear, came pouring out. She wiped her face quickly, trying to regain some composure. She still couldn't fully believe it. The ship was coming, but how far away were they? How long would it take to reach her? Could they get to her in time? The Aquila was not the rescue ship she had imagined. She had always thought that help would come in some grand, dramatic fashion. Flashing lights, the sound of engines roaring as the ship appeared out of nowhere. Instead, it was just a faint signal on the edge of a forgotten star system. But right now it was enough. It had to be. With shaky fingers, she activated her distress beacon again, sending her location out to them, letting them know she was still there, still alive. A part of her wondered, with a bitter laugh, if the universe had simply grown tired of her isolation. Or maybe, just maybe, it had never meant for her to die alone in the dark. Alia sat frozen in the cockpit, her heart still pounding as a signal from the Aquila came through loud and clear, like a lifeline thrown across the void. It had taken every ounce of self-control to steady her shaking hands and focus on the small blinking console. The voice on the other end had been authoritative, calm, and undeniably human. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she was not alone. Someone was coming. The words of the captain echoed in her mind. "We're coming to get you. Stay with us." She took a deep breath, fighting the urge to burst into tears. She had been on the verge of madness just moments before, and now there was hope, real hope. But hope was a fragile thing, and she couldn't afford to let it unravel before she could hold it in her hands. The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Alia had spent weeks, no, months, fighting for survival, and now her body and mind seemed to be recalibrating slowly, painfully. The adrenaline surged as she prepared for the human ship's arrival. Her hands worked swiftly, checking the communications array again, ensuring the beacon was still active. She sent a few final bursts of data, coordinates, a brief report of her health, and the condition of the ship. The ship, her ship, the one that had once felt like an extension of herself, now just a broken shell, a tomb of its former self. The comms crackled once more, pulling her back into the present. "This is Captain Gray of the Aquila. We're closing in. Get ready for extraction." The words were simple, but the promise they held was more than she could comprehend. Extraction. She was being rescued. In mere moments, she would no longer be alone. She stepped away from the console, her legs unsteady. Her stomach growled once again, a reminder of how long she had gone without proper sustenance. Her body had been running on empty for so long that it had adapted, though the signs of malnutrition were starting to show. Her skin had taken on a pallor she hadn't noticed before, and her hands trembled from more than just fear. The ship rocked slightly, as though the proximity of the other vessel was beginning to affect the gravitational pull. Alia's heart raced in her chest. She had to get out of here. She had to meet them halfway. She couldn't risk waiting for them to dock. What if something went wrong? The sound of the Aquila's engines vibrated through the ship's hull. It was a low, almost melodic hum, unlike anything she had ever heard. The sound of life. Her breath hitched in her throat as she rushed to the airlock, her boots clicking on the metal floor. The hatch opened with a slow hiss, and there it was, the immense, gleaming outline of the Aquila against the backdrop of stars. It was everything she had imagined, and more. Sleek, imposing, an intricate network of shining metal and thrusters that seemed to pulse with power. The ship loomed in the distance, an otherworldly presence. She stepped out into the open bay, her fingers grasping the handrail as she waited for the transport to approach. The small shuttle that would take her aboard seemed like a mere speck compared to the size of the Aquila. But she didn't care about its size. She didn't care if it was perfect or pristine. She cared that it was coming for her. The shuttle docked with sharp hiss, and the door opened. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the glowing interior of the ship. She could make out the outlines of a tall, broad-shouldered figure, his face hidden beneath a helmet. The figure stepped forward, then lowered his helmet, revealing a face weathered by time and space. A man in his late 40s, with dark brown eyes that were sharp yet kind, carrying the weight of someone who had spent too much time in the void of space. "You must be Alia," he said, his voice deep but warm, carrying a strength that immediately put her on edge. "I'm Captain Gray. Welcome aboard." Alia blinked, unsure what to say. Her tongue felt thick in her mouth. Her words tangled in her throat. She nodded, fighting to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. She didn't know how to respond to this, how to react to being saved. It was all happening too fast. She was overwhelmed, uncertain, grateful. "Are you okay?" Gray asked, his gaze sweeping over her. She must have looked worse than she realized, shaky, gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes. The quiet concern in his voice softened the impact of his initial, commanding tone. I'm alive," she said hoarsely, the words feeling foreign on her lips. "That's more than I could have hoped for." He nodded, offering her a small, understanding smile. "It's not over yet. You've made it this far. Now let's get you out of here." Alia allowed him to guide her onto the shuttle, her legs unsteady as she took her first steps onto solid ground in what felt like forever. As the shuttle doors closed behind them, she glanced back at her ship, now a tiny speck against the stars. It was over. The darkness, the isolation, it was all in the past now. But as the shuttle began its slow journey toward the Aquila, she couldn't help but feel a gnawing uncertainty in her chest. She was going to be rescued. Yes, but what did that mean for her future? She had survived alone for so long, and now, in the presence of others, she felt strangely small, vulnerable. Captain Gray's voice broke through her thoughts. "You've been through a lot, Alia, but you're not alone anymore. We've got your back. All of us." The promise in his voice gave her pause. She would have to trust him. She didn't have any other choice. As the shuttle docked with the Aquila and the doors opened to reveal the rest of the crew, Alia took a deep breath, bracing herself for the new reality that awaited her. It was only just beginning. Alia stepped off the shuttle and into the sterile, humming environment of the Aquila, her senses overwhelmed by the clean, antiseptic air and the quiet efficiency of the crew as they worked. The ship's interior was unlike anything she'd ever seen, sleek, well-maintained, with walls that seemed to pulse with a soft, ambient light. The contrast between the Aquila and her own broken ship felt surreal. Here, everything was working. Everything was alive. She almost didn't know how to fit into it. Captain Gray led her through the corridors with ease, his presence calm and authoritative. She tried to keep up, though her body ached with exhaustion. She hadn't realized just how much she'd been running on pure adrenaline until now. Her legs felt like lead, and her chest tightened with each step. They passed crew members who nodded in greeting, each one of them going about their tasks with precision. None of them seemed to look at her with pity, though she could feel their eyes occasionally flicker in her direction, assessing, curious. A woman like her, alone for so long, would naturally provoke interest, but they didn't linger. They didn't ask her questions. They just moved with purpose. Finally, they reached the medical bay. The door slid open with a hiss, and Alia was met with the clean scent of disinfectant. A soft beep sounded as the door closed behind them, and the doctor, a woman with sharp eyes and short-cropped hair, turned to greet them. "Captain," she said, her tone businesslike but not unkind. "You've brought her in. I'll take it from here." Gray gave a curt nod and stepped aside, allowing Alia to be led toward one of the examination tables. The doctor was already moving, her hands busy with medical instruments, scanning Alia's vitals and checking for signs of dehydration. Alia barely felt the needle prick her arm as the doctor drew blood, her mind still spinning. It felt like she was being pulled into a new reality, a reality where she was no longer in control. "How long has it been since you had a proper meal?" the doctor asked, her voice gentle but matter-of-fact. "I don't know," Alia replied, her voice rough. "A few weeks, maybe." The doctor nodded as though this wasn't surprising. She moved quickly, efficiently, as if she had dealt with situations like Alia's before. "You're lucky you're alive," she muttered under her breath, but not unkindly. "I'll get you rehydrated and stabilized. We'll have to run more tests to see the full extent of the damage. You've been pushing your body past its limits." Alia nodded numbly, too tired to offer anything more than that. She was exhausted, physically and mentally. Every part of her ached, but the overwhelming sensation was that she was finally safe. For the first time in months, she wasn't alone. It was a strange comfort, but also a deep, unsettling realization. She had lived so long with no one, no contact, no company, that now, with other people around her, she felt like a stranger in her own skin. The doctor finished her initial work. Leaving Alia alone for a moment, Alia closed her eyes, trying to shut out the world around her. The steady hum of the Aquila systems was calming, almost hypnotic. She thought back to her ship, the Obsidian, the way it had once felt like home. It had been so familiar, so personal. Now, it seemed like a distant memory. The Aquila was far more than just a ship. It was a vessel of hope, of life. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening again. She turned to see Captain Gray standing in the doorway, his eyes intent, his expression unreadable. He looked different now. Not the commanding figure who had first rescued her, but someone more human, more approachable. His gaze softened as it met hers, and for a moment, the distance between them seemed to disappear. "I know this is a lot to process," he said, his voice quiet. "You're not alone anymore, Alia. You can take your time to adjust. We're here to help." She nodded again, though a part of her resisted. How could she just adjust? How could she simply accept that she was now part of something else, something bigger than herself? She had spent too long surviving alone, fighting for every breath, every scrap of food. It wasn't just her body that had been broken. It was her mind, her sense of self. She wasn't sure she could be anything other than the survivor anymore. "I'll need to know what happened to your ship," Gray continued, his voice practical. "What caused the damage? Any data you can give us would help." Alia hesitated, the thought of recounting the events weighing on her. The crash, the damage, the silence afterward, the long days of trying to contact anyone, only to hear nothing but static. "I don't know," she said at last, her voice small. "We were hit by something, an object, I think. I didn't have time to assess it before everything went down. I tried to send a distress signal, but she trailed off, her throat tightening. She had done everything she could, and it had still been useless. She had failed. Gray didn't press her, though. He just nodded, understanding. "We'll get the data from the wreckage," he said. "In the meantime, you can rest. We'll take it from here." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time since she had come aboard, she realized that she wasn't alone in this. The crew of the Aquila was more than just a group of rescuers. They were people who had their own lives, their own goals, their own stories. They weren't here to judge her, to pity her. They were here to help, to bring her back from the brink. But as the doctor returned to check her vitals and Gray turned to leave, Alia couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming. There was a purpose to this rescue, something bigger than just saving her life. The Aquila wasn't just a ship. It was a lifeline, and somehow she had become part of something that she didn't yet fully understand. But that would come soon enough. For now, she had to rest, to let her body heal. But as sleep began to claim her, a nagging thought lingered. What had happened to the Obsidian? And why did she have the sense that her troubles were only just beginning? Alia woke to the soft hum of the Aquila systems, her body feeling heavy, but undeniably better than it had in days. She took a slow, deliberate breath, the air warm and clean in her lungs, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel the cold, suffocating grip of isolation. It was as though the walls of the ship had wrapped around her, giving her a sense of safety she had long since forgotten. But it didn't quite reach her heart yet. She swung her legs off the bed, the motion fluid but stiff, her muscles protesting the movement. Her body was still recovering from months of abuse, and every joint ached in ways she hadn't realized until now. The doctor's gentle warnings from a night before echoed in her mind. Your body will heal, but it will take time. There was a soft knock on the door, followed by the sound of it opening slightly. Gray stepped inside, his expression steady but warm. "How are you feeling?" His voice had a tone of concern that was, to her surprise, genuine. "Better," she answered, though the word felt too small for what she was truly experiencing. "It's strange. I didn't realize how much I needed to rest. I didn't realize how far gone I was." He nodded, stepping fully into the room. "You're safe now. That's what matters. But we'll need to go over the details of your mission and what happened to your ship." Alia tensed slightly at the mention of the obsidian. The crash, the endless drifting, the silence, it all came rushing back. She had pushed those memories into the back of her mind, compartmentalizing her pain so that it wouldn't overwhelm her. But now, with Gray standing there, expecting her to relive it all, the weight of it hit her again. I'll need time to process everything, she said quietly, not meeting his eyes. I don't know if I can go through it right now. Gray regarded her for a long moment, his gaze soft but resolute. I understand. You've been through a lot. But the more we know about what happened, the better equipped we'll be to help you and anyone else who might be in danger. She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. She had known this would come, the moment when she would have to recount every detail. It was a logical next step. Yet, in that moment, the idea of speaking about her failure felt like swallowing glass. You're right, she finally said, her voice low. I should tell you. I want to know what happened too. Gray moved to the edge of the bed and sat down, his posture casual but his attention sharp. Take your time. Just start where you can. Alia nodded, collecting her thoughts. The memories of the obsidian were fragmented, like a shattered mirror that she was trying to piece together. She could still recall the mission briefing, the excitement, the sense of purpose. She had been on the edge of something extraordinary. But then, everything had gone wrong. We were on a routine exploration mission, she began, her voice catching on the words. We were surveying a newly discovered asteroid belt, cataloging its composition, tracking any anomalies. It was supposed to be routine, nothing more than a blip on the radar. But we encountered something. She paused, the image of the object still vivid in her mind, dark, oblong, like a shadow among the stars. We were hit before we even saw it. Gray didn't interrupt, letting her speak at her own pace. The collision, Alia's voice faltered. The ship's systems failed immediately. Engines, comms, life support. Everything went down at once. I tried to manually regain control, but the damage was too extensive. We didn't even have time to send a distress signal before we were thrown off course. Stranded. She swallowed hard, her throat tight. I don't know what hit us, and I don't know what happened to the rest of the crew. The last thing I remember was trying to get a transmission out before the backup systems went dark. And then nothing. She exhaled shakily, the weight of her failure pressing down on her chest. The silence between them stretched out, thick with her unspoken fear. Fear of not knowing what happened to her crew. Fear how it had all gone so wrong. Gray finally spoke, his voice measured. But there was something there, an edge to it that she couldn't quite place. That's the part that concerns us. The object you encountered. We've been tracking anomalies in this sector for a while, and we've picked up strange readings, unexplained energy signatures, objects that shouldn't be where they are. We thought it might have been an accident, but now... His voice trailed off, and Alia felt her pulse quicken. What are you saying? Gray stood up and walked over to the small console in the corner of the room, tapping in a few commands. A holographic display flickered to life in the air between them. Alia's eyes widened as a map of the sector materialized, filled with pulsating red markers, each one denoting an anomaly. There were dozens of them, scattered like a constellation across the otherwise empty expanse of space. We've been studying these for months, Gray said, his gaze focused on the map. They appear randomly, no pattern, no explanation. But the one your ship encountered, he paused, turning to meet her eyes. It's not the first time someone's disappeared in this region. Alia's stomach churned. You think my ship was just one more casualty? I don't know, Gray said, his voice dropping. But something is drawing ships here. We need to find out what it is. Alia's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. And you think that something might be connected to what happened to my crew? I'm afraid so, Gray answered, his expression tight. We need to know everything you remember about that object. Every detail could be important. Alia's breath caught in her throat. The situation was far bigger than she had imagined. What had started as a simple mission had turned into something far more dangerous, and she had been at the center of it all. She looked at Gray, feeling a weight she hadn't anticipated. She had thought that survival was all she needed to focus on, but now she realized it was only the beginning. There were answers out there, answers she needed to find, before anyone else became lost to the void. "We'll figure this out," she said, more to herself than to him. "I'll remember. I have to." Gray's expression softened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something almost like empathy. "We'll help you, Alia. We're in this together now." And with that, the next chapter of her life began, not just as a survivor, but as someone who would face whatever mysteries lay ahead, determined to uncover the truth.